we were planning this meeting, we had to select a speaker, and I piped up and thought, well, why don't we have Ron Ho? Everybody agreed. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, he's an excellent jeweler, and I think, two, he brings his cultural heritage through that jewelry. And I had an opportunity to go to southern China with him on a trip, and it was just a really an experience. And I didn't realize the diversity of the culture and the crafts of China, which he has here. I think he single-handedly cleaned out half the country. We all had 50-pound suitcases. So I'd like to welcome Ron to come up, and he's going to talk about his jewelry and China, I believe.
I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about until I read the newsletter. So anyway, I thought, well, I could talk about a lot of areas of the world, but China has been one of the places that I've been going quite a bit recently. And I just came back in August to September. I went on the Silk Club, which is a completely different trip than this one is. So anyway, this particular trip, the first time I got to go on it, I went with Phyla McDaniel, who was an art teacher in California. And anyway, in the summers and on holidays, she would take people to China. Well, about now, she's probably taken over 80 trips to China. And she knows what to do, what to see. I mean, if you go to an area, and like this last trip, we discovered the market in Kashgar was on Sunday, and they had us scheduled to go there on Saturday or something, you know, and leave. So we would have been really furious, but she knew everything about it. So the first trip, I went with Phyla. And then the year after that, I decided I was going to take my own group, and that's the one that Ron went on. But anyway, this particular part of China that I'm going to talk about basically is the southwest part of China. And I guess the best thing to do is to show you the map. First of all, that's the basic map, of course, of China. And if you notice, there's Thailand and Laos and Vietnam is right around there. And then you'll see, this says Kunming right here. Okay, this is Yunnan province, and then east of that would be Guizhou province. And we're going to spend most of the time in Guizhou, and there's a few slides in Yunnan province. Now, the biggest city, I'm sorry. I guess here's the map of Yunnan province, and Dali is one of the towns that we went to, and this is Lake Dali, and this is where a great number of the tie-dyes are done. Oops, I can see what the problem was. Okay. Well, let's look at this. Well, that one, I guess it didn't drop down, so this is okay. This is Guiyang, which is the largest city in Guizhou province. And then there's Kaili, and I don't know, we won't worry about that other side, but Kaili's about here. And then above Kaili is Shandong, where we're going to the festival, okay? Now, is that left one in focus? No. There it is. All right. This is what the landscape in Guizhou is like, because it's sort of like the rice basket of China. And it's incredibly beautiful. And you can see that most of that area has little tiny villages, and then the people from there will go out to work in the fields. And most of the crop is probably rice. The yellow there is what's called rape. And they plant rape because it helps replenish the soils. And in Guizhou, we find that lots of the mountains they look like big Hershey kisses. And the people there, their main, gosh, I don't know what's this problem. Most of them have the water buffalo, but lately with what's happened in China recently, of course, with actually the private enterprise, they've been able to afford these tractors, which they use both for working in the fields and also as their own private transportation. But there's still the work that is done with the strength of the human body. And in Guizhou, they also have these almost miniature horses that pull the carts. One of the incredible things about going to this part of China is that you discover that so much of the earth and mountains have been terraced. And when you think of the energy that went into doing that terracing, that probably took literally centuries, it's pretty remarkable to see it. And the other thing that also amazed me was these incredible walls. And if you look at them with those rocks that were put there as holding walls for the terraces, again, the manpower that went into making those. The one thing is, of course, that I never got tired of looking at the rice fields. They were always incredibly beautiful. The variety, and the amazing thing about them is that they started at the top and terraced all the way down to the bottom, and in some cases, they literally hit coal. They went so deep. But the thing that I love about the rice fields is that they almost look like the mirror claws of India, with all the water that's reflected. The rice crops, of course, at various times of the growing season have water that covers the whole section of that terrace. They get about 3 crops a year of rice. And among the rice fields, you'll find these graveyards with, and white, of course, is the mourning color for the Chinese. And so that would be among the rice fields. And these are the wild irises. And you will also see these wonderful forms made with the rice straw. And this is how they dry the straw to feed the animals. This actually is a pen for a pig. But what's wonderful about all the houses that you see there is that they're made with a great variety of materials. As you see here, it's dirt and earth, and the houses can be straw. Or these are the wonderful tall roofs, but sometimes they're made out of slate as well. The one thing that I loved about going to this province was that for me being Chinese, it took me a long time to want to go to China, because when China first opened up, you couldn't go and see the art. And they took you to things like gasoline chemical plants or something like that. And I really wasn't interested in that. So I finally, after all these years, decided that I did want to go. And the wonderful thing about going to this part of China is it's like what I had envisioned the old China was like, with these incredible farmhouses and the field. So it was truly a wonderful experience for me. And these are the wonderful farmhouses, and they have these long, thin doors, and you'll find incidentally that they'll have on it, pasted on the doors, will be wood blocks that will provide protection for the new year. And then usually there's writing in the calligraphy on the doors, and there's usually 3 of them, but there are different kinds of couplets. And the guide told us one, like, for instance, as an example, one person had on their house, "Our mother died," and the next one said, you know, "She was a very good person," and the third one said something like, "We hope she is happy in heaven." So they'll have these different ones. But with the communist regime, they've also had couplets that say things that are the communist sayings as well. But I love the arrangements of all the farm and tools and implements. But even when you look at these houses, and even though they're old and they're worn, I mean, there's still a basic elegance about them. On our trip, sometimes what would happen was that, obviously because of the fact that we were on a bus, and when it was time for lunch, you couldn't just go to a restaurant. That wasn't always possible. So the guides would have arranged that we would sometimes go to a farmhouse, and the women in that area would cook for us. And this is one of the farmhouses. And what I loved about going to this particular one, this was on my first trip, was that you can see, if you know Chinese furniture, here are those same basic forms in the furniture, except this is, you know, cruder, but the same kind of benches, the same type of square table. And the women were wonderful to us. And here they're pouring tea and they're singing to us, and they won't stop until you entertain them. So they heard all of our versions of "You Are My Sunshine," camp songs, and all of that. Across the way from where we ate, I looked up, and here was one of the old kilns, and these are the climbing kilns, and you can see the different chambers on the left as it goes up. But they load it all, and of course, they start the fire in the first chamber, and as the gases and heat rise to the second chamber and starts to heat that, then they light the fire in the second, and so on. And it can take several days to light all of the chambers. And of course, this is the same kind of kiln that the Japanese use as well. Now, I have to tell you that most of the tribes in this part of China, in the southwest China, are Miaos. But they are known, each tribe is known by the kind of costume they often wear. So this woman is, I believe, like the red horn Miao. And this hairdo she has is part hair and part yarn. But we saw her walking along on the way to market. And this was the market. And of course, everyone brought their livestock to sell. But there were also, of course, the food places, and for some reason, I don't know, but pork fat seems to be a big hit. And we were served that a few times, and no one seemed to even want to try it for some reason. It's just fat, period. And these were the food stalls in the marketplace. We didn't eat there, but what's kind of interesting, and you can see that in this part, they also are close to Sichuan province. So there's a lot of the hot chili peppers that are being used. But I like the photograph on the right because here she's got this big mound of dough, and she drags over it what looks like a cheese grater, and that's how she makes the noodles. And of course, these were the dentists and the doctors. You notice he's smoking his cigarette. And we watched this fellow getting his tooth pulled, and here he's getting his, he did get an injection of Novocaine, but then we saw him later, and the tooth was being pulled out with a kind of a rusty needle nose plier. Now, Anshan is this one area of China where they have this very old folk opera. And it's not like what we think of the Chinese opera with them kind of singing. It's more acrobatic with people with sword fights. But the one wonderful thing about this particular area is that they carved these beautiful masks, which we were also able to buy. But this is a truth. You can see some of them are very young and others, and they're the apprentices. And of course, while we were watching, around us, surrounded were the Chinese themselves and the kids, and of course these are the local dudes. And what's great, of course, is that, you know, China has changed so much. You almost never see anyone wearing the Mao jacket. Usually if you do, it's an older man or woman. And especially if you go to a place like Beijing, of course everybody has the latest hairstyles and everything else. So China has changed tremendously. Now, maybe you're wondering and thinking, well, what is a minority tribe, right? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, the Chinese government did not consider you Chinese unless you were a Han, okay, H-A-N. And the rest of the people who were not Hans were considered the minority tribes. And for the longest time, they ignored them. But I would say maybe about 25 years or so, years ago, they asked them to register their tribes, and they've come up with 55 other groups that are the minority tribes. Well, the Hans represent 1.1 billion people, and the rest of them are minorities. But because China is such a big place, of the minority tribes, they represent about 100 million people. And it stretched all the way, totally across China. I mean, we're talking about way in the north close to Russia, and where we have the people like the Kazakhs, right? And those people, a lot of those are Muslims. And then we go all across, we have the Tibetans would be considered minority tribes, and way to Guizhou. The women on the right is a minority tribe called the Yi tribe, which is spelled Y-I. And with the minority tribes, they have their own costumes, their own customs, their own kind of food. And many of the minority tribes cannot speak to another minority tribe because their language is different. So that's why, of course, the Chinese government made Mandarin as the official language. Now, these are Han women, and you can see this is their costume, and they literally would pluck the hair above on their forehead and above, because they gave them a higher forehead and they think that's a sign of beauty. And all of them on the back side, they have this bun, and they have these jade pieces of jewelry. Now, this is a group in Yunnan province, and these are Nashi people. And you can see every tribe is different. Now, some of them look similar, but many of them look different as well. And they all have their own way of looking beautiful, and it's quite incredible. But the Nashi in Yunnan are the ones who do these tie-dyes. And here you can see in this particular place where they dye the tie-dyes, they're showing us some of their examples. They're really quite amazing. And the one on the floor is one that Ron Pasco bought, and it's really a very beautiful one. We had to fight over it. But anyway, I love it. It's really a beautiful one. But you can see the women sitting on the streets, tying all the knots. And they go to this place to have a diet, and I think it's sort of like a cooperative. But anyway, these are the indigo pots that they dye them in. And here they're laying out, ready, hung up to dry. Now, this is a Nashi village that we went to, and you see these really wonderful courtyards and the walls that are made of adobe brick. Just a year or two prior to that, they did have an earthquake, and a lot of these were destroyed. But here are these wonderful grinding stones. I mean, if I could have lifted and carried it home, I would have brought it. And we met this nice old woman who wanted us to come in and see, you know, her courtyard. And she's a Nashi, and this is her grandchild. Notice now, actually, she's wearing what would be like an old Mao cap and jacket. But she wanted to have us see that this is her carrier on the right-hand side that she would put her basket on. And this is her good one because she would only put this on when she went to a festival. And you can see how it's all padded and quilted. And then on the other side are these round, circular, quilted pieces that are on the back. This went over the top of this piece. And there's also some, I don't know if those were embroidered or woven, those black and white pieces there. But anyway, the round circular forms, they have the same number as to represent the constellations in the sky. And we went to this place there that was not far. That was a monastery. But I loved the beautiful mosaic work in the sidewalks. but we got to see this monk here, and he's very well known in this area because he was one who has taken a pilgrimage to Tibet, to Lhasa. He walked over and walked back. Around Dali was this very beautiful pagoda farm that we got to see. Now, it's quite thrilling when you get to go to the minority tribes because when they greet you, they usually have the younger members all dressed up in their costumes. Now, if they're having a festival, all of the village would be dressed in this way. But since they were not having a festival, they greeted us in these costumes. And always, of course, they usually gave you rice wine and sometimes little things to eat. Now, all of these necklaces that you see here that they're wearing are probably not silver. Many of them now are what they call white copper, and like they add to it nickel. So it looks very silvery, but it really isn't silver. The real authentic religious ones, or ones that are done for a particular ceremony, are always silver. But again, they always entertain us, and often by singing songs and doing dances. And this is another tribe where we were greeted by all the children waiting for us when we arrived. And they're all wearing these caps that their mothers made and embroidered for them. There is one on the table that you'll see from this particular tribe. Now, what was fascinating about this particular tribe and the way they made things was that, first of all, they batiqued the piece of fabric, and then on the top of the batik, they then started to embroider the designs on. And let's see, let me go back to this. But some of the jackets that you see the woman is wearing, they did not embroider the whole thing. So it was part batik and part embroidery. But many of them were completely, totally embroidered. And these are sleeve panels on this one jacket. This is a very fine piece. The minority tribes do absolutely beautiful embroidery. Now, incidentally, I forgot to mention now, but most of them are known as meows. Now, some of these meows have gone down into Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and they became the Hmongs as we know them, right? Who have come here and do all that embroidery. However, none of the embroidery that I've seen here matches the embroidery that I saw in China, which is still pretty extraordinary.
Where do they get the threads from to make the embroidery?
They buy them commercially, yes. But I think what's interesting is that, as you notice, as they move across, each embroiderer will sort of put their own touches in. And you can see how the one on the left, on the right-hand side, became just these indigo blue and kind of pale turquoise design against all that color. So it just is about, I guess, how they feel as they're embroidering it. And of course, many of these jackets are done by the young girls and becomes their wedding costumes. Now, this particular group used to be Meows, but they, around 1993, they did split. And, but they're known now as the Geishas, Geija. And the thing about the Geishas is that they do the most extraordinary blue and white batiks. And I've got a number of the aprons, like you see the aprons that they're wearing. Now, one thing about the minority tribes is that things are constantly changing. Like Phyla said that the colors will change by, of course, by the kinds of yarns that they can buy, right? So all of a sudden, I guess they discovered this neon orange and loved it. And the other thing that changes, that almost no one is wearing anymore, would be the shoes that they used to make everything from quilting the sole and making the whole shoe itself. And occasionally at a festival you see someone wearing one of those shoes. But mostly you can see they're wearing tennis shoes and whatever. But the geishas are very skilled at doing the batik. And it's done on either hemp or on cotton material. And you can see the woman on the right who's using a little instrument to draw these parallel lines on with wax. And of course then they dye them in indigo. I read that for them to do their costume takes about, this is their wedding costume, takes about 5 years. And here's one of the jackets. And you can see part of the sleeves are embroidered and the other part is batik. And I have one up here that Phyla said is really a museum piece. The one I have up here is done on hemp. And the designs look almost Renaissance-like with these circular forms. You'll see it when we turn the lights on. Now, this other tribe, this is the kind of jewelry they wear on the back side. And of course, you know, in a lot of the jewelry, they move and they also make noises, which is something we don't think about in our jewelry, right? And of course, one of the reasons, of course, is that the noise scares away evil spirits. And the necklace on the left is just made with aluminum wire. The designs that you see them wearing that are embroidered, the star shape actually came from the cloven foot of a pig. And that's how they got the design. And, you know, it's hard to imagine that the piece on the right, every bit of it was embroidered, wasn't it? Now, I have to say, you know, as we're looking at these, mostly the techniques I'm showing you are the textile techniques. I've been there twice, and we went to a silversmith's house, but it was a festival, so we didn't see him making anything. And I've asked, you know, the guides, you know, where are they making this jewelry? Because I wanted to see it, and I've never gotten to go to one yet. So hopefully one of these days I will. This group was quite interesting because their costumes look very much like something from Guatemala. And when they entertained us, they were very somber and they sang us this song. And then we realized that in the end that they were singing us a hymn. because some missionaries had come, like 75 years ago, and had converted these people. But the skirts again are all batik and embroidered. The costume on the left is what the man is wearing. This is another tribe who also came to this gathering. Some of them lived so far, incidentally, minority tribes are also known as hill tribe people. So they live many times way, way up in the hills where there's actually no roads. And during the Cultural Revolution, Mao said you had to wear the Mao jackets as an example, right? And because they weren't roads to some of these people, they simply ignored that. And I think that it was a good thing, because I think that many of them would have lost their crafts had that really happened. So it was a good one. Now, this particular tribe, the leader of their group talked to us. Now, first of all, let's look at the embroidery first of all. The baby carriers, we'll see a lot of different kinds. And, they love their children. So what they do is they lavish their love by making these wonderful baby carriers that are all embroidered or batik, depending on the tribe. And they make one for each child, because they feel that the soul of the child is in that baby carrier. But here, the head of the tribe is explaining to us that in this particular case, when the men, this tribe had migrated from further north, and when the men go to the fields, if something should happen to them, the women would know how to get back to their own village by the design of that jacket. So all those horizontal lines that you see represent the rice fields. And those other kind of flowery ones actually is a mountain behind their village where they originally came from. Isn't that interesting? One very fascinating tribe that we did get to visit on this last tour was the Longhorn Meow. And this is the little village that they were in. It took us like, I don't know, 6 hours to get there, and maybe it was all uphill on a bumpy, rocky road, and then maybe it was 4 hours to get home since it was downhill. But this particular tribe wears these very elaborate hairdos that are wound around a stick. And part of it is their hair, but a lot of it is yarn. And here they're performing these dances for us. And like the young man's apron, I mean, the first time I saw this, I thought, oh, this looks like a piece of commercial cloth, this apron, because it was so perfect. But all of that is all embroidered. Here they're showing us how the mother is helping her daughter put this hairdo around this stick and winding it around. And this old woman, of course, this is, I think, like the everyday wear. And you can see that because of pulling their hair so tight, that they literally begin to go bald. This would be a family altar in this particular tribe. These people are called the shiny silk meow. And the reason is, Some of you know, oh yes, we have to show Ron. Michelle Van Slyke, who's from Bainbridge, is wearing a shiny silk jacket. And it's this beautiful kind of luminous chartreuse color. And it's dyed with a water hyacinth. And the interesting thing, though, is that they've never found the way to fix it. So, you know, when you have this jacket, when you touch it, everything on your hand turns purple. So that's unfortunate. There, I have one up here, and you'll have to look at it. It's a beautiful color. They gave us those necklaces made from eggs and garlic, I guess. Oh, here's a shiny silk. See, it's quite beautiful. It's almost luminous like a beetle. Now here she's showing us how they take the fabric and they paint it with this dye, and then they pound it into the fabric, and then they smoke it over the fire, and then eventually, now this wasn't cut, but I think the silk turns more of that beetle green color, but this still turns slightly luminous. One of the nicest places we went to was called Langde, Langde. This is a beautiful village. It was clean, it was orderly, and they've had a lot of tourists visit them. And the houses look very much like the Japanese farmhouses. And the Japanese have come to study this village because they feel that they may have some of their roots from here. And they're studying the languages as well as things like the architecture. You can see the little footbridge across the river there. But we were always greeted by the men, usually, playing these Lushan pipes, which is a bamboo pipe. And whenever you go, as I said, you're always greeted with this rice wine. And of course, I don't drink. And if you don't drink, then you're the enemy, because the enemy does not drink. So what I learned to do was kind of move my lips, like, you know, I was drinking. Of course, they looked at it and they didn't see any of it. It was gone. But anyway, in this particular village, I think with the 9 steps or something you had to go up, and each one had these women with this, either cups or the water buffalo horns. It's interesting because I took the same, I didn't know it, but I took the same woman on 2 different trips. Now this particular costume, incidentally, that they're wearing, these are called the banner costumes because the story was that a young man went off to war, and he loved his mother very much, and when he came back from the war a couple years later, he found his mother along the riverside shivering, and he took the banner standard and wrapped it around her to warm her, and then brought her home, and that became how the development of that banner skirt that you see there. This group is called the Black Meow, and they wear these wonderful headdresses made mostly from chains and silver hair ornaments. Now, I believe that when they have the black fabric, that means that they're not married. And